So I have the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would do unto themselves. Big
Mm,
difference.
mm,
Like what I
okay.
think you might need and what
Mm,
you feel you might need is could be totally different.
sure.
So that's why I
Yeah.
said putting yourself in other
Yeah.
people's shoes.
Yes.
That's sort of where the
Yes.
platinum rule comes up. Put yourself in other people's shoes, and then I think you'll get an appreciation. You'll do a better job for them.
Welcome back to Powered by People. Today's guest is someone who has not only shaped the legal landscape in Waterloo Region, but has also left his mark in business, politics, and community leadership. Don Travers. With over 50 years of legal experience and a deep understanding of real estate, corporate law, and business strategy, Don has built a legacy of innovation and service. In this conversation, we dive into the power of differentiation, how standing out in your field can lead to success, and his unique take on the platinum rule, a perspective that shifts the focus from how we want to be treated to truly understanding what our clients need. If you're looking for practical wisdom from a seasoned leader who knows how to think differently and stay ahead of the game, this episode is for you. Hit that subscribe button and let's jump in. Don, thank you so much for carving out of your busy schedule to be with me on the show today. I know you have practiced law for a very long time, and I want to talk quite a bit about that. But I actually want to start by getting to know who was Don pre-law. So, first of all, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Montreal, and I spent my summers on the Gaspé Coast. That's where my family's originally from.
And do you get out there to visit very often in that area?
No, most of my family, they've all left the Gaspé Coast.
Okay. Okay.
There's not a lot of opportunity on the Gaspé Coast. Yeah, so basically, all the Anglos, shall we say,
Hmm.
have left. I have a few relatives down there that probably would consider themselves more francophone now than anglophone. Many of my family, we originally came from the Channel Islands.
Where are the Channel Islands?
Channel Islands are part of Great Britain. They're just a few miles off the coast of France. So they were actually
Oh,
one
okay.
part of Britain that was captured by the Germans. And there's Guernsey and Jersey and such. These are the places. And they were actually French Protestants. They're called Huguenots. And they fled France when they were expelled by France when the religious detente between the Catholics and the Protestants blew up in the 1600s. So they have wonderful francophone names, but they're Protestants, and they have these wonderful francophone names, and they don't speak any French.
Interesting. Yeah, that's
Yes.
pretty unique. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my cousins all speak French now, and
Hmm.
they're fluently bilingual as I was many years ago.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's kind of a unique thing. In fact, a lot of people in France weren't even aware that about these Huguenots, and
Hmm.
they are very powerful people. And like a few years ago, there was, I think, the 300th anniversary of the expulsion or the persecution of them, and they found out that a lot of the leaders in France were actually French Protestants, but nobody sort of knew this. It
Hmm.
was kind of an interesting, well,
Hmm.
maybe an interesting story.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds like it would be a great documentary. Don't know if there is one, but that would be interesting to learn about.
Well, I think in France they had certainly, when they discovered this, there was a lot of interesting stories about it, and how many, as I said, many of their leading politicians, etc., were actually Protestants.
Mm-hmm. So who was Don as a boy or as a young man? What was your personality like? How would people have described you?
I don't know whether I had much of a personality actually. Uh, I was just the average kid growing up in the suburbs of Montreal. And in the summertime, I spent my time on the Gaspé Coast, sort of working on or traveling around on my grandfather's farms and etc. He was a real
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, and I guess, maybe I learned something from him on that. I think that I just, he was always doing something different. He had huge, large
Mm-hmm.
farms. He had a racing stable, had lots of standard bred horses. He was the Coca-Cola bottler. He built bridges. He built wharves. he was a liberal bagman, I guess.
Hmm.
And I asked him once because he used to build all the wharfs on the south shore of the Gaspé Coast for the federal government. And then when the Liberals lost the election to Diefenbaker, all of a sudden, of course, he wasn't building any wharfs anymore because there was a lot of patronage in those days. So he wasn't building wharfs, and then the Liberals became the provincial government in Quebec, and all of a sudden he was building roads and bridges. And I said, "Well, Grandpa, what do you know about building a bridge? I mean, you built wharves, you didn't build bridges over
Hmm.
rivers." And he said, "Son, I don't need to know anything about building a bridge. I just have to know the man who gives the contract to build the bridge."
Ooh.
So,
Huh.
this is the way things worked in Quebec.
Yes.
Maybe it still works that
Yes.
way, but I mean, the patronage was so he said, "I can hire people that know how to build a bridge, but you have to
Hmm.
get the contract." And that's what I do. I get
Hmm.
the contract and then I hire people who, so it's kind of,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
sort of confirmed in my mind, I guess, how the political system in Quebec worked. And it probably worked in a
Sure.
lot of other provinces that way too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like he was a pretty big influence on you.
Yeah, he was, I was not his favorite, but he was a big influence because as a child, I would go around with him and I would ask him question on question on question. And he said, "That boy just cross examines me all day long.
Hmm.
He's
Hmm.
going to grow up to be a Philadelphia lawyer," which was not a compliment. I don't know anything about lawyers in Philadelphia, but, I don't think in the
He
country
didn't mean it in a good way.
I don't think he meant it in a good way, but he says, "That boy." And then after a while, he wouldn't take me with him, you know, but it sort of stuck that I was going to be a lawyer. And so
Hmm.
I've always pursued that. And of course, I've been a lawyer for over 50 years now. So I guess
Yeah.
it certainly stuck. So he sort of influenced me on that.
Yes. Yes. Okay, that's great because I was going to ask at what stage of your life did being a lawyer kind of start to get on your radar, so to speak?
So when I was about 6 years old.
Wow. This is very rare because I've talked to lots of people and often, they start over here and there's kind of a zigzag. So for you to have that as an idea, a pursuit that young, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, it was always on my mind. So everything I did, I just did enough to always keep that, I said, I guess that track open.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. So then what was the journey? So, 6 years old, you start having this idea planted, and then, here you are many years later. But what was the journey to go from that idea to begin in law?
Well, I went to, when I was in high school, I mean, I was, uh, how would you say, I was gifted.
Mm,
So I was in high school. I was taking first year math courses from McGill and stuff like that. But I said to my teachers, "I'm going to be a lawyer. I don't want to be an engineer. I don't want to take
yeah.
physics and calculus and all these other courses. Like, why can't
Hmm.
I just sort of be normal?" So I rebelled a little bit, but I was able to get lucky and get into Queens.
Hmm.
And that sort of freed me up to do what I wanted to do because before that
Okay.
I was taking courses. See, we didn't have the type of courses that they have now in school. I
Hmm.
mean, you know, if you were gifted, if you were a boy, you were going to do math, and so
Mm.
you were always,
Hmm.
you were. And as I said, I was in grade 10. I was taking university math courses, which I did not like, and
Interesting. Hmm.
the rebellious spirit in me, just started sort of just not study. I mean, I never
Mm.
studied, I never worked anything. I just went and wrote the exams.
Mm.
And so my marks declined, shall we say.
Okay.
By
Hmm.
the time I graduated, I went from 96 to 66 in mathematics and
Hmm.
stuff like that,
Hmm.
which was so many of my courses were mathematics because of
Hmm.
the way I was streamed.
Sure.
But I was able to get into Queens, and then at Queens, then of course I had the freedom to pick the courses that I liked
Hmm.
and enjoyed, and but always with the eye on I needed the marks to get into law school. And so that was it. And then when I applied to law school, it was the first year that I had to write the LSAT, the Law Scholastic Aptitude Test. And so I wrote that, and I did very well on it.
Mm.
And then I applied to law school, so I got accepted at all the law schools I applied to, and I chose UBC. And I'd gone out there in the springtime, and it was
Mm.
gorgeous. Vancouver in the
Mm-hmm.
spring is just lotus land. It
Mm-hmm.
was so pretty,
Yes.
and the temperatures were great.
Mm-hmm.
So I chose UBC, and then when I went back in the fall, it rained every goddamn day. It was just hell of a
Yeah.
swing.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Uh-huh.
lotus land anymore.
Right.
And I became, quite frankly, I became homesick. My
Mm.
girlfriend was back in Kingston at Queens, and so I called up Queens and I said, how about, what's the word here? Could I come back? And they said, well, yeah, you haven't missed very much. You can come back if you want to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I went back to Queens. So I spent a lot of time in Queens, which I love. I love Queens.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that's how it became. And then obviously in law school, I'm not a good student. I know that might sound surprising. I'm not a good student. I
Mm-hmm.
just sort of I tell people, well, you sort of spot the exam. Did this in high school too.
Mm-hmm.
You look at what the teachers are teaching. You look at what the main courses are in subject, and that's what you work on. That's what you study, and you sort of you don't study everything. I mean, they're always telling you to read the whole case, etc. And some of these
Yeah.
cases are 30 or 40 pages long. It takes a long time to read them, but there's also a head note, and you're
Okay.
probably not aware of this, but all law books have a little head note explaining what the issues were and what the decision was,
Mm.
etc. And it's
Yeah.
usually half a page to a page.
Mm-hmm.
So I just read the head notes. Didn't read all the
Mm.
cases. I read the head notes and did quite well. And
Mm.
when I graduated from Queens, I went to work for a big Toronto law firm, big tax firm actually. And then after spending time there and having no life, actually, it was like 6.5 weeks, 6.5 days a week of working. You might get
Mm-hmm.
Sunday afternoon off,
Mm-hmm.
and having every other than Friday night and probably Saturday night, basically, and Sunday night. I mean, 3 or 4 nights of the week, I was having dinner with the senior tax partner. Uh, and my wife sort of rebelled and said, this isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Mm-hmm.
a disaster.
Yeah.
And so I came to Kitchener Waterloo. I didn't want to be part of. I didn't want to be in the like a suburb or a bedroom community
Mm-hmm.
of Toronto. So I came to Kitchener Waterloo, and at the time, Kitchener Waterloo was the fastest growing community in Canada. And the other nice thing was coming from Montreal. I was a Montrealer, and
Mm-hmm.
somehow Toronto wasn't that classy a place in those days. So, Kitchener Waterloo, it didn't pretend to be, it didn't pretend to
Mm-hmm.
be anything other than Kitchener Waterloo. The people were friendly. It was a great community, and everything was so convenient. And having this farm background,
Mm-hmm.
and spending my summers on a farm, I just loved the fact that you could, for 5 minutes, and basically in those days, 5 minutes of driving, you could be out in the country, looking at the cows and the horses, and of course, our Mennonite people, their horse and buggies. And as a kid, I mean, I had a pony cart and I got around on my pony cart. And, so I sort of related to these people.
Yeah. Yeah. What year was it when you came to KW?
1974.
Hmm. And you've been here ever since?
Yeah,
Hmm.
I love it here.
Yeah,
And
me
then
too.
I became a city councillor in Kitchener and a regional councillor because we used to be both. 8 of the 10 councillors in Kitchener were regional councillors as well. And yeah, and I got involved in politics.
Mm.
I
Okay.
actually, I was when I worked in Toronto, I had been involved in a public offering. It was the first real estate investment trust (REIT), and these
Mm-hmm.
are very common on the TSX then, but it was the Heitman Real Estate Investment Trust. And I worked with, I mean, there was 4 big law firms involved in that, a very, very small part in it. Uh, but I gained experience from that. So when I came up here, one of the firm's clients, I worked for a big firm up here who had a big holding of land, had assembled land all around in those days, the Waterloo Wellington Airport, so our airport, and they wanted to do it go public. So I did a prospectus, I did a public offering, a prospectus, and in doing that, I learned a lot about how to service this area, a lot about the
Mm.
municipality.
Mm-hmm.
And I was dealing with, sort of the leading industrialists at the time in Kitchener Waterloo. And they said, we need somebody like you on the city council.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'd only been in Kitchener Waterloo for 5 years, so I, like, didn't really
Yeah.
sort of understand that. But I had a little bit of free time just before the election because the prospectus was successful. The Securities Commission passed it. And that was quite a shock too, because with Heitman and my experience dealing with the Security Commission on these prospectuses, I mean, you'd get a deficiency letter of 20 or 30 pages that you'd
Mm.
have to make corrections to your
Wow.
prospectus.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I got my letter and it was like 2 pages, and there were two things they wanted me to do. So I called them up and I said, I just can't believe this. I mean,
Mhm.
this is my first solo
Mm.
prospectus,
Sure.
and you're telling me there's only two changes I have to make? And they said, well, this is the first land bank perspective we've ever seen. We don't know what to question. So
Mm.
yeah, we only asked question two things. I said, well, that's fantastic. You know, and then that was done. And then I had I had about a month off, and I was sort of between major projects.
Mhm.
And so I ran for the city council. And
Mhm.
I just got the idea that I sort of was interested in politics, I suppose. I got the idea that politics is all about name identification. You have to differentiate yourself. And that's sort
Mhm.
of, I suppose, the one word, most important word in my vocabulary is differentiate yourself.
Mm.
So you have to differentiate yourself. So what I did was I got a sandwich board sign, which I stood beside, and I said, vote for Don Travers. And I lived in Forest Heights. And in those days, all of the traffic in Forest Heights basically came up McGarry
Mhm.
onto Fisher Almond.
Yep.
So I stood at the top the first morning, and I stood at the top corner there and I waved at people. Vote for me, and I waved at people. And of course, I just wanted to crawl into the ground, really, because like it was so crazy, and they looked at me and like, what is this guy doing, etc. And but the one thing for sure, it's 6 and 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
You can't go knocking on people's doors, but I could stand
Right.
on a street corner
Mm.
and people could sort of see me and see my
Yes.
name and identify with me.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
started doing this, and at first it was kind of embarrassing. And as I said, talk about doing something outside. I was very
Mm.
uncomfortable.
Mm.
But,
Mm.
I've done a lot of things in my life that I haven't always been comfortable with, but that's
Mhm.
what I did.
Yep.
And after about a week, people started waving and smiling and stuff like that. I think the one person that never smiled was my future wife. But anyways,
Going, what is he doing?
yeah, exactly. She always sort of had a scowl on her face, like,
Ah,
who is this
yeah.
jackass? And I ran against an incumbent whose father had basically built, Forest Hill, and a very, very, very nice, a very good family, etc. And I had a couple of people working for me. My campaign manager was another lawyer. He said, like about a week before the election, he said, I think you might win. And I said, I don't do anything to lose. Of course I'm going to win. And
Good for
sure enough,
you.
on election night, I won,
Uh-huh.
and I won huge. I mean, I had about 75% of the vote, and I could have been elected in half the city.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, then I thought, oh my God, now I've got to become the councillor. Well, in those days they called it alderman. I had to become the alderman. So I got elected, and I am just a poor lawyer. Well, not poor maybe, but I'm just a lawyer. The person that I defeated, he had nothing to do. It's sort of like me after the prospectus. He had nothing to do. So guess what he did? He opened up a shop with his brother-in-law, a lawyer, another lawyer called Mark Nowak. So they opened up this little shop selling prepackaged meats and stuff like that, frozen food stuff, and they called it M&M.
No.
And the person I beat was a fellow called Mac Voisin, a great
Mm.
guy. We
Yes.
kind of even look kind of similar. We're similar age in that. So as a result of my beating him, Mac became a
Yeah.
multimillionaire, and I'm still just a poor lawyer. So I,
Well, yes.
so
Well,
when I see
thank
him, we
you.
still laugh about this. But yeah, he's done very
Yes.
well for himself, and M&M is obviously done very well as well.
Very well. Oh, that's a great story. I had no idea. And yes, thank you because I've done a fair bit of shopping at M&M, so I appreciate what you did to make that happen.
Yeah. My small part in his
That's
success, a
right.
very small part, but
Exactly. Exactly.
sometimes you lose, you actually win.
Right.
So he lost the election, and
Yes.
actually, obviously, he
Mm.
in the long term, he won big.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, that's a great story because we just don't know. I often use the phrase, we'll see, right? Because you just don't know. Something can seem good and can turn the other way, turn bad. Something can seem bad and good can come of it. So that to me is a classic we'll see story.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, when you started practicing law, was there anything about it that was different from how you imagined when you first set out on the pursuit?
Um, I don't know really. I mean, at 6 years old, you don't really know what a lawyer does. You're just
That's
told that
what's
you're going to be a lawyer.
fascinating.
You
Yeah,
know, you're
yeah.
just told that, like that you ask a lot of questions,
Mm-hmm.
and you're sort of, and one question leads to another. You're just interested in what people have to say, and you're interested in people and what they have to say.
Yeah.
So when I became a lawyer, I had this interest in tax for some strange reason. Um, so I took, tax courses in law school, and I did very well. And then the bar admission course, I did very, very well in the tax because I worked for a tax firm, and that's why I
Mm.
worked for a tax firm because I was really interested in tax.
Mm-hmm.
But then they sort of changed the tax code. One time our book used to be about this big,
Mm-hmm.
and it was written by lawyers. But then a guy called Benson, who was the member of parliament from Kingston and the Islands, actually, he was an accountant. He rewrote the tax codes in the early 70s. And all of a sudden, they were this thick. And the problem really was that really they were designed for accountants, not lawyers. So,
Mm.
lawyers, we
Mm-hmm.
lost a lot of that business really to the accountants,
Mm-hmm.
because of
Mm-hmm.
the way the tax code was written. So
Mm-hmm.
then, you just sort of evolve. I mean, I think that, life is an adventure. They say we're going to have more than one careers. And certainly in law, I started off doing tax, and then
Mm-hmm.
I did some of this public offering,
Mm-hmm.
and then I did a lot of work. I led a lot of buying and selling businesses, mergers and acquisitions, doing a lot of corporate work. And you just over time you just move along and evolve into different areas.
Mm.
So over years, I used to do a lot of work for banks. I did receivership work. I acted for the Bank of Montreal, the Bank of Nova Scotia, uh, and but over time, as you age, bank officials change,
Mm-hmm.
and there's an evolution, and all of a sudden, and then I started, I would do these, and I was also on the board of National Trust, which was taken over by the Bank of Nova Scotia. So I did a lot of commercial work for them.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, once again, the Bank of Nova Scotia takes over National Trust. And over time, the people that you're dealing with move on,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and so you start losing certain segments of the business, etc. But it
Mm-hmm.
always surprised me that I would have clients, good clients, who would buy a home, and but they wouldn't use me. And I asked one day, well, like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't I buy your house? I said, you invited me to your new home. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, it's a new home, but why didn't I buy your house? And the response was, well, we didn't think you'd be interested. I mean, you're doing
Mm.
all these debentures and stuff like this, and all this financing. Yeah, we wouldn't think you'd be interested. And I said, well, I'm kind of interested in it. I am.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to be, like I had a lawyer working for me that just did the sort of the residential real estate.
Yep.
And I said, yeah, that would be a good thing. And I also found that with the big corporate financings and stuff like that I did for National and Bank of Nova Scotia, I didn't do a lot of financings for Bank of Montreal. I did their receivership work, but I found there's peaks and valleys.
Mm.
You'd be busy, and then
Mm-hmm.
there'd be a valley. And I thought, well, the residential real estate would fill in the valleys.
Mm. Okay.
And so then I
Mm-hmm.
started going after the residential real estate because
Mm-hmm.
I think really I'm a lawyer, but it's really I'm sort of a businessman too.
Mm-hmm.
And I also realized probably back then that you know you're a salesman. We're all salespeople. I think too many lawyers when we graduate. I'm sure it was like this when I graduated. Oh, I'm a lawyer. I've got my ivory tower. I'm a lawyer. This respect factor, and I just came to the realization, no, that I'm like everybody else. I've got to sell my services. I mean, I can be the smartest lawyer in the world, but if I don't have any clients, I can't prove that. So first of all, you have to get
Right.
the clients, and then
Mm-hmm.
you can then
Mm.
you can do good work and
Mm-hmm.
presumably help
Mm-hmm.
yourself along.
Mm-hmm.
So I started learning how to sell myself
Mm-hmm.
and put myself. I found this with politics. I learned to put myself in my constituents' shoes. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
above them. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to get down in their shoes. What concerned them? What was their problems with the city, and how could I help them? And then I just applied that to basically my whole life, as always trying to learn and respect other people, listen to their views, and that not necessarily agree with it. I mean, many times in the city council, I'd have somebody say, you haven't listened to us, like, and I said, no, I've listened to you. I've spent 3 hours listening to you, actually.
Yeah.
I just don't agree with you, you know?
Mm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the politics was a great learning experience. I
Mm-hmm.
did that for
Sounds like
10
it.
years, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think politics should be a career. In those days, I think people ran, and a lot of people ran, and they were sort of leaders of the community. Not that I was a leader of the community because I'd only been living here for 5 years, but people ran to make a contribution and then they left. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought, 10 years was enough. I made my contribution and I left. And that was probably, I had a friend of mine who actually said, you're either fish or fowl. Like if you're a lawyer and a politician, but you've got to choose which one you're going to be, because I
Mm-hmm.
was losing business because people saw me as a politician, and I had some very
Mm-hmm.
good clients that said, well, we don't, we want your vote on the city council, and we don't want you to be our lawyer because you
Mm.
know then you'll have to declare a conflict and we'll lose your vote on the city council. So I
Gotcha.
was losing
Mm-hmm.
business, and he pointed
Mm-hmm.
this out. People are leaving you because they need your vote on the city council, like road contractors and things like that. There's all sorts of people who deal with the city,
Yep.
and I was having to declare these conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
So I left it, and it's probably one of the smartest things I ever did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I might have become what a lot of people are, just like municipal politicians that are there forever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I found I left because after 10 years, I just didn't want to say, like, a new person would get on and they said, well, have we tried this? And I said, yeah, we did that years ago, like it doesn't work. And I thought, no, I mean, new people, you want new people with new ideas. And you just don't want to be one of these people that say, oh yeah, we've tried it, like I know everything, and like don't bother us type of thing. So I've always been interested in trying to learn new things. And I thought, well, I'm not learning anything new, and I'm just really preventing from some younger people from maybe,
Mm.
being able to make a different contribution.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever have a mentor, or are you more of a self-taught kind of person?
Well, I'm certainly self-taught, but I did have, a lawyer I worked for 5 or 6 years in this large firm in Waterloo. He was an excellent lawyer. His name was Jack Harper. Actually, they named a library in Waterloo after him, John M. Harper Library. I don't know why people that are named John get the name Jack. I never figured
I
that
know.
out. Like,
No,
why are
no.
you Jack?
Mm-hmm.
Why, if your
Yeah.
name is John, why wouldn't you just be called John? But
Right. It's
anyways,
pretty simple.
yeah, yeah, he was he was a wonderful, wonderful man, and so I
Mm-hmm.
was very lucky that way.
Mm-hmm.
In politics, not really, and but I'm sort of, I'm kind of as I said to you, one of the key words to me is differentiate yourself, and I've always thought, well,
Mm-hmm.
why would anybody want to deal with me or be their city councilor in that if I'm the same as everybody else? And that's why differentiating yourself is so important. So that's why I stood on a street corner and waved at people. That differentiates you. So nobody else did that. And then the liberal, some of the liberal people and the conservative people said, geez, that's really seems to be working. And then when they saw the election results, they said, holy mackerel. Like, this guy came out of nowhere. Nobody knows him. He's only been living in this community for 5 years. And all of a sudden he's got 75% of the vote against, the sort of the local,
Yeah.
scion of a very, very great family, actually. The Voisins are a wonderful family. uh, you know, how did he do it? Well, he
Mm-hmm.
differentiated himself. And then I thought the same way in law is differentiate, be different. So I just think differently than other
Mm-hmm.
people,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess the way I approach problems is different too. You
Mm.
know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
And
know
you've
in
been,
the
go ahead.
well, I know when I got on the city council, I can remember the first time we were doing the budget. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, and we don't know any. There's all these headings, and they just like everything's going up 5% or whatever. Nobody seems to have any idea. And so I said, this is really, this is kind of dumb. Like, I'm supposed to be sort of going through this budget, and the only thing we seem to be spending time on is the grants. How much do we give to this group? How much do we give to that group? But we have no concept of the real dollars. We're relying upon the staff. So I said, this doesn't make any sense. So I came up with, well, I didn't, I mean, this concept was available. I learned about it from my brother, who was an accountant, and he actually, he was a partner in a big accounting firm. And the Auditor General of Canada takes, big accounting firms send some of their young stars to Ottawa to work for the Auditor General. And he was there. And he said, well, you should introduce zero-based budgeting. each line in the budget should have an explanation of what is that department doing,
Mm.
and
Mm.
a little thing, and do you need to provide that service or whatever? Now, of course, many of the services municipalities have to provide, but we're sort of seeing this craziness. And this wasn't crazy at the time, but we sort of see this with Musk in the States now, where he
Mm-hmm.
wants everybody to say, well, what are you doing? Like, how to justify
Uh-huh.
your job?
Mm.
Well, it wasn't to justify jobs. It was to learn what that budget line was, how much was being spent on it, and was it getting the results they wanted? That's what I wanted to get to,
Mm-hmm.
is what are the results they're getting? And it certainly upset the commissioner of finance, et cetera, because all of a
Mm.
sudden I turned the whole process on end. But what it did is the other young counselors in that, they agreed. They said, yeah, like this is the first time that we sort of understand what the hell's going on.
Mm.
And so I became the finance chairman of the city. And then a year later, I became the finance chairman of the region. So the whole time I was in the city council and the regional council, I was the finance chairman, simply because I wanted people to have a better understanding of where we were spending our money.
Mm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
always made sure that our tax increase came under the rate of inflation, which would be nice if the politicians could do that today. I sort of think some of the money is sort of squandered, and maybe they should go back and analyze some of the programs they're doing, and is the program actually accomplishing what they wanted to accomplish?
Yeah.
Because most of it is just, well, every budget line you just add 2% to, and that's it. Well,
Right.
so why do you need a
Yeah.
politician to tell you 2%? You don't.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of positive changes come from disruptors. It sounds like you are a disruptor of sorts, just
Well, I was.
challenging the way it's always done and taking another look at it.
Well, certainly on the financial side of the city and the region, I did. Now, of
Mm-hmm.
course, they don't do that anymore, but that was sort of a hot topic in the early '80s, zero-based budgeting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of companies probably, they probably look, if they're trying to save money, et cetera, and they look at their operations. I know in my practice, I'm always looking at the operations, and I've developed sort of an assembly line as I move more and more into the residential real estate, and I'm always reading books and looking for choke points, like where's the system being clogged up? At the entry
Mm-hmm.
level, this level, whatever level, and uh, and that's made my factory.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid to call it that. At one time, I was embarrassed to say I was, like a real estate lawyer, or I ran a real estate factory. Now I'm rather proud of it. I'm apparently, according to Terranet a few years ago, I'm the third largest user of the land registry system in the province of Ontario.
Ah.
So it seems to
Mm-hmm.
have worked.
Yes, it does. So, what keeps it interesting for you after all this time?
Well, the most important thing is to try to always get better. I've been practicing for over 50 years, but I still feel I can learn and we can improve on the system.
Mm-hmm.
So, and always trying to differentiate ourselves, myself
Mm-hmm.
and my firm. So just, setting up like more of an assembly line, having different people working on just like an assembly line,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
being more efficient, and therefore through that efficiency, making more money, to be quite
Mm-hmm.
frank. Um, yeah, so that's it. But always trying to provide better service to realtors. I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, uh, I uh, I know when I first sort of started doing some residential real estate, I ran into a lady who was a receptionist at Olson Realty, and they were in the Westmount Square building. It was a big real estate firm at the time, and she was excellent receptionist. I thought, and the first contact, that's really an important thing. So
Mm-hmm.
on a Friday, I asked her if she'd like to come to work for me, and she agreed. And on Monday, she was my business development person, because I just thought, like, we have to have somebody out there.
Uh-huh.
You want to have consistency in your promotion. So when I was busy, taking out bankers and that, she could be seeing realtors and that. So we sort of fill in those valleys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so she was excellent. And I asked her when she started working for me, I said, "What can I do? Like, what can I do to help realtors?"
Mm.
And she said, "It's really simple. Deliver their commission check." And I said, "Really?" She said, "Yes. I mean, that's their paycheck. Everybody gets a paycheck on a Friday, but realtors only get it when they get paid." And in
Uh-huh.
those days, all Canada Trust was a big broker at the time.
Mm-hmm.
All their commission checks had to come out of London. So, the paperwork would
Mm.
go to London. It could sit in
Mm-hmm.
London for a week or two and then would come back. And I would hear from realtors that, they were kind of miffed at that idea that they couldn't get it. And then also lawyers would get the checks. Well, lawyers, I mean, they didn't want to issue a check separately. They wanted to do all the paperwork at the same time. And the firm I worked
Mm-hmm.
for, well, hell, they would sit on a commission check for 2 or 3 weeks because they had to count the paper clips and, like phone calls and how many
Mm-hmm.
photocopies there were. So there was a lot of stuff going into the billing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, once again, maybe being the disruptors, I thought this is really dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would we waste our time recording phone calls and that? Like, can't we just sort of plug a number in for that? Like, how many,
Yeah.
what component of the real estate deal involves phone calls? How many paper clips are you using? I mean, they used to actually count the damn paper clips. Can you imagine
Wow.
having you're paying somebody to
No.
count paper clips and
Wow.
silly
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I talked to her. She said, deliver the commission check. So what we would do is the first check we'd cut, we'd close a deal on a Friday, say,
Mm-hmm.
and the clerk wouldn't do all the accounting, wouldn't count the paper. Not that they ever counted paper clips for me. Well, they did a little bit until
Mm-hmm.
I put the kibosh on that. But I'd have the commission check cut, and then I'd go and drive over to Remax or whatever, and I'd deliver the commission check myself, which once again was a big differentiator, right? Because I'd show up
Mm-hmm.
at the real estate and
Mm-hmm.
the receptionist would, oh, Mr. Travers here. Well, I've got a commission check for Joe. And she'd call Joe out, and Joe said, gee, thanks very much, Don, for bringing my check over. And
Yeah.
then other people would be coming and going, and they said, what are you doing here? Oh, he's just delivering this commission check for Joe. So,
Mm.
differentiate.
Yes.
And then we
Yes.
just kept on building on that. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was the first thing. And then the next thing we did was we fixed the fee. I said, this is silly. Like, I don't want my clerks having to do all this bookkeeping and accounting and stuff for over photocopying that. We know what the average search cost is because we had title
Mm-hmm.
searchers. We know what, the disbursements on a search normally are.
Mm-hmm.
So we come up with a number and we just fix our fee because too
Mm-hmm.
often lawyers play games with their fees
Mm-hmm.
and often with the disbursements. So I fixed the fee and I advertised that, and then I got a call from the Law Society, and they
Oh,
said,
okay.
"What are you doing?" Well, first of all, they called me when I hired the promotion person. They said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, she's not practicing law. She's
Mm-hmm.
just a promotion person." Well, like the big firms, I don't know whether the big firms in those days even had promotion people. They certainly didn't have it in Toronto at the time when I was there. They said, "Well, what does she do?" I said, "She just goes around and talks to people, talks to realtors,
Uh-huh.
and tries to sell her services." Oh, okay, that's okay. And then they called about the fixed fee, and they said, "Well, how can you do that?" I said, "Well, it's really simple. I mean, if you do 10 real estate deals, you should know what the average cost of a real estate deal is. And then
Yeah.
you determine what your margin is, how much you want to make, and then you just fix the fee. And people like to know fixed fees. You go in and buy a pair of
Yes.
jeans.
Yes.
You know what the price of a pair of jeans is. Why, when you
Yes.
buy a home, do you
Mm.
have to, not have any idea what the lawyer's fee is going to be, what the disbursements are going to be? Maybe he says the fee's this, but the disbursements are all over the map, etc.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you just, you fix the fee and once again differentiated ourselves. So today, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, as a result of that, all basically all real estate's quoted as a fixed fee residential real estate. So I mean, the consumer has me
Mm.
to thank for that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that was another way that we differentiated ourselves. And
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
like to know what it's going to cost.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And then of course
Absolutely.
another differentiator is then I talked to business people now, and they said, well, if you want to, really differentiate, guarantee your service. Like, are you any good?
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
think we're damn good. Well,
Yeah.
then just say, if you're not satisfied, we'll give you back your fee. Now, to get that, though, you have to tell us what we did wrong because we want to be able to
Sure.
correct it.
Yes.
You just
Yes.
can't say, oh, I'm not happy. Well, why aren't you happy? Well, I'm just not happy. Well, no, that doesn't cut it. What did we do wrong or how could we make you happy?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so yeah, we and sometimes it's really silliness what people come up with. I mean, we had one lady, she bought a home and her name was Diane. And when she bought the home, her name Diane had one N in it.
Okay.
And then she sold that home and bought another home using me. And she came in to sign her purchase, and she said, "Well, my name's spelled wrong. I want my fee back." I said, "What do you mean your name's spelled wrong?" "Well, there's two N's in Diane." Well, I said, "But when you bought the property, I'm looking at your sale. There's only one N in your name. And when
Mm-hmm.
we received the mortgage instructions on your purchase, there's
Mm-hmm.
only one N in your name. So how are
Yeah.
we supposed to know that there's two N's in your name? When we sell, we
Mm.
have to sell in exactly the same name.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of confused.
Yeah.
But anyways, she said, "Well, no, I think it was unprofessional to get my name wrong." So I thought, "Holy crap!" Like really. So I said, "Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you back your fee on the purchase because
Mhm.
that's the one that's got the name wrong.
Mhm.
But on your sale, that's the way you bought it. You don't get your fee back on your sale. I'll give you your
Mm.
fee back
Mhm.
on your purchase."
Mhm.
Just so that when you say that you guarantee the fee, you can say, yeah. So, if somebody came along and said, well, you advertise that or you talk about that, but do you ever do it? Well, yeah, here's an example with
Mhm.
Diane, and there were other examples. We had another lady. Oh, she thought it was unprofessional because we sent her, we faxed her like the documents, and one of them, the statement of adjustments came in. It was slightly like sideways. I don't know how it got
Okay.
in the machine or something.
Sure.
She thought that
Mhm.
was very unprofessional. I said, it's a statement of adjustments. There's nothing unprofessional, and that's just how the machine sent it out. You
Yeah.
got all the
Yeah.
information. Like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
But once again,
Yeah.
without getting into arguments, silly stuff like this, I said, okay, we'll give you back your fee. But
Yeah.
then I make a note, but don't come back.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't want
Right.
people like that. And realtors, you have
Right.
to, and I guess if you realize you have somebody like that, I mean, sometimes you just tell them, I think you'd be happier with another lawyer.
Mm.
If
Mhm.
somebody just, you figure that, oh, I think they're just looking for the feedback and they're coming up with these, like really silly things. Why
Yeah.
don't you
Just
just get another
reaching.
lawyer? Just, yeah,
Mhm.
just take, and realtors
Mhm.
have to be able to do the same thing. Sometimes you
Sure.
get a client, you just know they're a pain in the ass.
Yep.
You don't really want
Mhm.
everybody as a client. You don't
No.
want the
No,
good
you
ones. Of course,
absolutely.
that's what Buffini talks about. You want the ABs, you don't want the Bs and
Yeah.
Cs type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Do you have this sense of finding a better way to do things outside of work? Do you do that in other areas of your life?
Yeah, I tried in my golf game, but it doesn't always work.
Okay. Yes, and I do know you love golfing, and are you still skiing as well?
Yeah, I just came
Yeah.
back from Colorado, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I
Did they
ski
have
now.
good snow this year there?
They don't have a lot of snow, actually. No, the snow
Okay.
wasn't good. I mean,
Mm.
it was good compared to Ontario.
Okay.
The people, I'm a member of a ski club, the Half Fast Ski Club. If you see it quickly, you get the Half Ass Ski Club. So,
Okay. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So it's
Uh-huh.
mostly Americans, actually. So we had some
Mm.
interesting discussions when I was out there.
Oh, I
So,
bet. I bet you
yeah.
did.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we were out at Telluride, which is in western Colorado. And, but there wasn't a lot of snow. We have a lot more snow here than they did.
Yeah.
I mean,
It
it
was a
was,
big
it was
snow
really quite
year
amazing.
here. Hmm.
Yeah. And, they had just got 3 feet of snow just a couple of days before we arrived. And they said, thank God we got that snow. But they were all complaining about how icy it was. And I said, you guys don't know what ice is. I said, we ski on this and we think this is perfect. And you're telling me it's icy. I said, ice is ice. This is not ice. This is crust. And crust
Yeah.
is okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I said, come and ski in Ontario and
Mm.
then we'll show you ice.
Hmm.
But,
Hmm.
but no,
Yes.
it was great. The wonderful thing about Colorado is the sun always seems to shine. Our first day was 47 degrees Fahrenheit
Okay. Nice.
and
Yeah.
on the mountain. So in the top of
Uh-huh.
the mountain, the snow is good. At the bottom, it got a little softer.
Yeah.
The only problem was the next morning it got colder, and so the bottom was rock hard, which
Mm.
is not that
Hmm.
enjoyable to ski on because it's sort of
Sure.
like your molars are sort of
Good for you. So your leisure activities, you've got it seasonal, which is nice. You've got your golf in the nice weather, and you've got your skiing in the colder weather. So
mm,
nice, well-rounded leisure schedule for you.
yeah.
Yeah.
I prefer the winter because my family are all skiers,
Oh,
and
okay.
other than my son who had a bad back injury, so he doesn't
Mm.
snowboard anymore. But
Hmm.
yeah, my daughters and son-in-law ski, and I've got two granddaughters. In fact, one of them
Fabulous.
is in Sault Ste. Marie at the Ontario Championships this week.
Really?
So I'm looking
Wow.
forward to seeing how she does.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah.
she's up there. She left yesterday actually. The bus picked them up at ski club, Osler Ski Club in Collingwood, and they take the bus of the kids from Southern Ontario that are going up there that qualify,
Mm.
and so she'll be racing up there. And she just
Amazing.
on Sunday she just won the ladies' championship at our ski club. So I got a nice picture of her with her trophy.
Mm. Hmm.
So
Well, that's
I
pretty
love the
exciting.
winter because I spend the weekends with my kids and my grandkids.
Mm, mm, yeah, yeah. No, that's amazing. Before we flip into some rapid fire questions, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to mention or talk about?
I'm probably talking too much, actually. So
No, no,
probably,
that's what this is for. This is for
probably
exactly that.
not. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
just once again, as I said, just always trying to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And in the practice, I
Mm-hmm.
said
I love
always
that.
trying to
Mm-hmm.
differentiate yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I did that in politics. I did
Uh-huh.
that in law, and we're still trying to do that. Today we don't deliver the commission checks anymore, but we direct deposit them to the brokerages.
Mm-hmm.
We Yeah, some of the other things we do is, of course, when we close a deal, we'll call the agent and say, okay, the deal's closed. Check will
Mm-hmm.
be coming to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we just try to, have all that contact
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yes.
with the agents and clients. And then, of course, we're always trying to, cross sell to people too. Like, I mean, everybody
Mm-hmm.
needs a will, power of attorney. We see the disasters when people don't have wills and powers of
Mm-hmm.
attorney.
Mm-hmm.
So we're encouraging people to do that. So we discount our fee to prepare that for our clients. And that's been very successful too. So we have a very large estate practice now
Mm-hmm.
because we have so
Mm-hmm.
many wills, and unfortunately, people die. So
Mm-hmm.
and if you've done a good job for them, usually a lot of times, we'll have their will, and the family will come and we'll look after their estate. So
Mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
have, I think we have about 16,000 wills. So
Yeah.
that's going
Yeah.
to be that part of the practice is every year seems to double in value.
Amazing. One of the things that always comes to mind when I meet someone else, I'm often thinking, how can this be done better? That is how I'm naturally wired to think, whether it's when I'm being served at Tim Hortons and I think, why are they doing it that way, to all sorts of things. I've always appreciated Dyson as a company, the way that they tackle something, and it doesn't always work, but I love that they take something and try to design something better than anybody else has done it before. I think it's just a fabulous quality. I respect it.
Yeah, well, that's what we've tried to do. It's just like when somebody calls into our office and wants a fee quote. I mean, we
Hmm.
have people dedicated to that because some of the books I've read, like Toyota's, they'll say, like, if you get back to somebody within a half an hour, you've got like an 80% or 90% chance of getting the deal.
Hmm.
Every half hour, every hour that goes by, your
Yeah.
percentages drop, 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 and
Yep.
it's amazing. I have called
Yeah.
lawyers, and I mean, it's not hard to be really successful because I've talked to some lawyers and I said, "Oh, I never return the call until they've called me twice." And I
Oh
think,
my gosh.
all I
Yeah.
can think of
Yeah. Yeah.
is in my own mind is,
Yeah.
"Man, are you stupid?"
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
I actually have heard this from lawyers, where you'll call up,
Wow. Yeah.
and we price check, obviously, not all the time, but we
Hmm.
tend to be the leader, but we price check. And you'll get, oh well, you'll have to. The lawyer will call you back tomorrow, and the lawyer might call you back the next day, might call you back 4 hours later. There just seems to be no concept
Mm.
of how to run a practice or a business. Like, I
Yes.
run
Yes.
a professional practice business.
Hmm.
It's a business,
Right.
and that's how I
Hmm.
see it. And I
Hmm.
see myself as not just a lawyer, but as I see myself as a businessman.
Right. Yeah.
Really, and as I said, as a salesman, a
Hmm.
business salesman, and so that's why we're always trying to differentiate, to sell ourselves,
Hmm.
prove that we're better than somebody
Hmm.
else.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
fortunately, it's not that difficult in some cases.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
people wait for you to call them two or three times before they're going to return your call.
I
Wow,
know. I know.
that's pretty easy to beat
I
that
run
one.
in I run into the same thing, trying to maybe, book a showing on a listing, and cannot get a hold of or get the listing agent to call me back.
Hmm.
And I think, aren't you trying to sell the property? Isn't that the goal?
Well,
Yeah,
as I said, not
fascinating.
everybody's a business person, and
Uh-huh.
we all have different strengths. But I think if it's not your strength, get somebody who can work for you that is their strength.
That's great.
And always try
Mm-hmm.
to work on
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, what are my strengths, and then
Mm-hmm.
just accentuate those strengths. And the fact that I'm different,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think was a strength. I saw that, because I knew I was different.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of trying to make my difference the same as everybody else and sort of fit into their hole, I fit into my own hole. I said, I'm different, yeah, and if you want to deal with me, you're going to get something different. You're going to get a different approach, and I'm going to have my platinum rule. You know what the platinum rule is?
No. Do tell.
Well, the golden rule. I mean, the golden
Yes.
rule is to
Okay.
do unto others as they
Mm-hmm.
would as you would do unto yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Good rule.
Mm-hmm.
But what if the other person's not the same as you and none of us are the same? How does that work? So I
Mm-hmm.
have the platinum rule. Do unto
Okay.
others as they would do unto themselves. Big
Mm.
difference.
Mm.
Like what I
Okay.
think you might need and what
Mm.
you feel you might need could be totally different.
Sure.
So that's why I
Yeah.
said putting yourself in other
Yeah.
people's shoes.
Yes.
That's sort of where the
Yes.
platinum rule comes up. Put yourself in other people's shoes, and then I think you'll get an appreciation. You'll do a better job for them, and they'll have a better understanding that you care for them because you're actually thinking of how they feel, not just how you feel. Now, I mean, the golden rule is great. It's
Mm-hmm.
a great start,
Mm-hmm.
but I
Sure.
think you can
Mm-hmm.
go beyond that.
Mm.
And
I
that's what
love
that's what
that.
I've always tried to do. So that's the
Yeah.
platinum rule. Do unto others as they would do unto themselves.
Mm-hmm. I really like that. There's some great nuggets in our chat today. So I appreciate that. All right. Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Sure.
All right. Morning person or night owl?
Um, More morning now.
Okay. That's been in later life?
Yeah, I used to be up all I used to work in a tavern to help myself through law school. So I didn't get home
Okay.
till about 2 o'clock in the morning,
Mm.
after cleaning the urinals, which was not a very pleasant experience.
Wow. Yes.
And then I'd study from, till 2 till 6, and then I'd sleep for a few hours, then go to school so
Oh my goodness.
I would
Wow.
definitely be a night owl, but
Mm.
over time I get up earlier now.
Yes.
And,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, because I like to be waiting when the lifts open at the ski hills.
Huh?
So yeah, I get up early
Mm.
so that I get to the ski hill. So if there's powder snow, I want those first
Mm.
tracks. So yeah.
Yeah.
So now
Early bird.
I've evolved into a
Mm-hmm.
morning person, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. If you could teleport anywhere right now, where would you go?
I could teleport anywhere right now. I think Paris.
Mm. Lovely. Sounds good. What's a book, podcast, or movie that you would recommend?
Oh, well, I just read a really interesting book on artificial intelligence. I think it's
Mm.
Millionaires. I don't know. I can't remember the exact title actually
Mm.
because I don't
Hmm.
didn't read the title too often, but I read the
Yeah.
book. And I think that was fascinating. I think it gives, it made me understand what is, the neuron networks and how they mimic our brain, etc. So
Mm.
hopefully, I'm hoping that they can implant a chip into my brain. I think we're getting
Yeah.
close to that. So,
Probably.
yeah, so that I can, I won't have to worry about dementia or anything like that.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
it's coming. And it's really
Yeah.
interesting how computers are as scary actually in a way, but this book is very interesting. They talk about I'm getting off topic here, but they talk
That's
about
okay.
the Go game. I never knew what Go game is, but
Hmm.
apparently it's sort of chess is a sophisticated game.
Hmm.
Go is more sophisticated. It's a Asian game,
Hmm.
and they talk about they said, well, artificial intelligence. We got our computer. We feed them all these moves on the Go game, and then we go against Go masters. So they went against a Korean master one. Then they went against sort of the master of masters, a Chinese master, and on the 32nd move the computer came up with, move 32. And what it was is the computer looked at all these moves and was competing against this person with moves. And then it came up with its own move. And they said the computer actually analyzed all of these moves and then it made its own move. So it actually thought. And it blew the Chinese master right out of the water. He,
Of
never, like,
course.
nobody ever thought this. And they said, oh my God, it actually, it just wasn't mimicking what we had fed it.
Right.
It
Right.
actually put it
Yeah.
all together and came up with its own move. So that's sort of
Fascinating. Hmm.
yeah, I found the book fascinating. It just
Hmm.
talked about it. And, the
Yeah.
amazing thing is that the leaders in this, and I think the gentleman got a Nobel Prize, was a gentleman from U of T called Mr. Hinton. He was
Hmm.
Professor Hinton at U of T. And yeah, he's basically, I guess, one of the major fathers of artificial intelligence. And now they're going for general artificial intelligence, which is computers just putting everything together. Because I mean, they can do speech, they can do face
Hmm.
recognition, etc.
Hmm. Hmm.
But now the computer can actually make its own decisions and come up with these crazy moves. And this was sort of the breaking
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
of wow, this
Yeah.
is kind of really interesting. So
Yeah.
neuron networks, where they just look at how our brains operate, and they're implementing this through artificial intelligence, through hooking up computers to computers to computers.
Right, right.
Because our
Getting them
brains, I
to
mean, we've got a whole
communicate.
lot of neurons going back and forth there, and so they have to have lots of computers to have all these neurons bouncing around and coming up with decisions. So that was the most fascinating book I've read. There's a new
Yeah.
one out by Malcolm from Elmira.
Yes, Malcolm
Malcolm
Gladwell.
Gladwell, yeah. So I've got that's the next book
Something.
I'm going.
It's something the tipping point, but
Revenge of the
Revenge of the Tipping Point, right?
Tipping Point, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the one I'm just starting to read now.
Okay, okay. I
I
saw
love to read.
him. Yeah, I saw him when he came to the area to do like a talk at one of
Mm-hmm.
the Indigo locations. So
Well, I would have
about
liked to have
that.
heard about that. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
read
that
all
was
his
good.
books.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're
he's
fascinating.
great. He's
Yeah, they're
fascinating.
an easy read. They're
They
not.
are.
They're not
Mm-hmm.
huge. I mean, I'm reading one
Mm-hmm.
now. There was Homo sapien,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very thick book, and now
Mm-hmm.
the second version of that is Homo Deus, where we've sort of moved from it's his Homo sapien is the history of the human race. From
Yes.
animal, we're animals.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
some people don't like that, I guess, but that's the story. And to Homo Deus, where we actually become godlike with
Mm.
artificial intelligence, etc.
Mm.
But these books are like, oh.
Yes. So sometimes we need something that's a little bit easier to get through.
Yeah, a little, yeah,
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
like yeah,
No,
millionaire
absolutely.
brains, etc. Yeah,
Sure. If you think of the title of that one, let me know. I would love to read the AI one.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what's a hidden talent or skill that maybe many people don't know you possess?
Hmm. Hidden talent or skill. Boy, you stumped me on that. I don't
Stumped
know
you?
whether I have any
Yeah. Are you a good
hidden talents
cook?
or
Are you a
skills.
good cook? Do you barbecue? Do you?
Well, I do, but I'm not. I don't think there's any talent anything like
Okay.
that. Hidden talent or skill.
Differentiating. Honestly,
Differentiating,
you've kind of
yeah.
talked about it, really.
Yeah,
That's
I guess
something
that's probably
many
my
people
hidden
may
talent
not.
is
Yeah, superpower.
differentiating
Mm,
myself and never being satisfied. Always thinking I can
yeah,
improve.
yeah, yeah. Yep, same, same. Okay, this I'm curious to hear about this one. If you weren't in your current profession, what's a job you'd love to try?
Uh, Ice road trucker.
Really?
Mm.
Ah, that's an interesting choice. Yeah.
Well, I many years ago when I was putting myself through law school, I wanted to make lots of money. I put myself, so I actually got a job with the Iron Ore Company of Canada, and the job was in Labrador City. And so I flew up there, and I thought I'd get a window seat, which wasn't the smartest thing. I looked out the window, and as we took off from Montreal, I see flames coming out of the engine. I thought, holy crap, this doesn't look good. And I
Yeah.
also didn't realize that, these small planes, this is a small plane flying into Labrador City.
Hmm.
I spent the whole flight like this because my head was up against the side of because I had the window
Oh,
seat.
yeah, yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
after that, I never went for a window seat again. I
Right,
just skipped
right.
the aisle so you could sit
Mm-hmm.
properly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I went in Labrador, and I was a laborer working in the pelletizing plant where they
Mm-hmm.
take the iron ore, they crush it, and they turn it into marbles.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't ship, you can ship a marble because it won't attach to other marbles so much, but you
Okay.
can't
Mm-hmm.
ship the powder itself because it would solidify in the whole of the ship, and
Oh,
that would be
yeah.
the end. You wouldn't be able to ship it. You wouldn't be able to process it at the other end or get it out of the
Yeah,
ship.
sure, sure.
And fortunately, the foreman. They called it the concentration camp because he was German and the assistant foreman was Japanese. So it wasn't very political or correct in those days, but they called it the concentration camp. And when you were finished your day's work, like everything, you were just red. They didn't have a lot of safety masks, so I'd probably be dead if I had worked
Mm,
there very long
mm.
because when you came out of it, you spit red. You had red. You were just
Wow.
red. Your eyes were red.
Yeah, yeah,
Everything was red.
yeah,
But after about a week doing that, I'm thinking, wow, yeah, I hope I'm going to make a lot of money because like this is really a crummy job.
yeah.
The foreman who I'd come across at Travers, you're a university student, are you? And I said, yes, sir, I am. And he said, well, he says, you know how to drive a truck? I said, yeah. And I said, I've driven all sorts of trucks on my grandfather's farm, and I've driven horses back and forth from Prince Edward Island to Gaspé, etc. And he said, yeah, I know how to drive a truck. I know how to double clutch. I know how to do everything. He says, great. He says, we need truck drivers because, once again, not to learn, some of the, uh, some of the boys, some of the French Canadian boys and the boys from Newfoundland, they're not too good with driving the truck and they're stripping our gears. And, to redo a gearbox on one of these trucks is very expensive. So he says, tomorrow, before we start, I'm going to have them bring a truck over here and guy that's in charge of the trucks, you're going to come over and, you know, see if you can drive the damn thing. Next day, sure enough, I get in there and they sort of show me and I drove it around a few times and I didn't strip the gears, didn't grind anything. And I said, okay, you got a new job. So I became a truck driver. I always
Wow.
thought that was a great job.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, yeah.
you're driving one of those big dump trucks. And in those days, I mean, they didn't have all the fancy stuff they have now. Like, I mean, you were
Sure.
bouncing along and it was only 7 miles from the mine face, which was in Wabush, around the lake to the pelletizing plant. But you go back and forth and you could have a little nap in while you're lined up waiting for them to load you. And when you know they're going to load you because all of a sudden everything's banging and shaking and,
Mm,
it's making a hell of a racket. But yeah, so I drove a truck for that summer and, I kind of, I thought that was kind of cool.
kind of fun. Kind
So
of something totally different.
yeah,
Hmm.
so so if
Yeah.
I've always sort of had that dream of being a nice road trucker. Don't know why, but that's maybe because
And then you could be on a reality show about that because people are fascinated by that.
well, it could be, yeah. So,
Yeah,
I could be, I could be, a lawyer that's driving truck and helping out
exactly.
all the other drivers that are having problems,
I
with
think
the
we're
law.
on to something.
Yeah.
My final question. What's a motto or mantra you live by?
A motto or mantra. I think that, I've always really been, respect other people. That would be my always, and that's what I tell my kids and that. Always respect and accept everybody for what they are, who they are. So it's really concerns me these days with some of the anti-Semitism we see,
Yeah,
where people just because they're Jewish are attacked and businesses are attacked. I mean, like we can have differences,
yeah,
but
yeah,
we shouldn't
yeah.
take other problems from the old world or from the Middle East or that and bring them to
Right.
Canada and then
Yes.
start attacking other Canadians. So that would be just the respect for people. I think
Mm,
would be my
mm.
mantra, and for respect for everybody. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
literally, whether one's a Jew, a Catholic, a Protestant, a Muslim, whatever, just
Mm,
accept everybody. And there's so many good people in this world. I always like to think of people on the positive side, and just be there to defend other people, to defend people if they're in trouble. And
mm.
yeah, I just sometimes I wish that I would have that opportunity, like as I hear, sometimes you hear stories where like somebody is cursing a lady because she's wearing a hijab, or somebody's making an anti-Semitic, and I would like to just be there to be able to speak up and say, no, that's not right. You shouldn't
Yeah.
do that. But
Yes. Yes.
unfortunately, it doesn't happen very often in our community, and I think it's really important though. And I tell my grandkids that stand up. It's difficult. Like if somebody's being bullied, stand up for the person that's being bullied. And that could put you in that position. But do the right thing. And it's so easy not to do the right thing sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my just respect and always try to do the right thing and be there to defend other people if they're being abused.
Well, this is a great point to end on. I really like it. The reminder to respect everybody, especially with the climate, we're in right now. So a really, really great reminder. So thank you so much again. I know from our conversation, I have a lot to chew on. I really like some of your um, reminders and advice about differentiating, about the platinum rule, all that kind of stuff. And I loved hearing that, some of the stories about your journey. So thanks again for carving out the time, and look forward to next time I get to see you in person.
Yeah, anytime.
All
Always,
right.
always. As I say, I'm always there to help people. I mean, if there's any questions you have or that, I'm always there to talk to people. And that's one of the wonderful things about when you get older, and that your time. It's enjoyable to try to help other people out.
Yes, I agree. Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate it, and it does come through in your business, in your company. Okay.
Well, I hope so.
Yes.
That's what we strive for, always to try to be just a little bit better. As I said, always trying to put ourselves in other people's shoes so that we understand them, what they're going through, so we can be better and respond to their needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. All right. We'll
Perfect. Well,
see you.
thank you for the opportunity. As I
You're
said, I
welcome.
don't
My
usually get to
pleasure.
talk like this on
Yeah.
a
It's
story.
great. Yes. Okay. We'll see you soon.
Okay, take care. Yeah, look forward to meeting you again. Bye bye.
Bye.